Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are fundamentally shifting how we think about an undergraduate science degree. We're tearing down those traditional, invisible walls between subjects and looking at the absolute big picture. Because honestly, getting a Bachelor of Science in fields like microbiology, chemistry, medical lab technology, or biotech, it's no longer just about framing a piece of paper or stepping into some quiet, isolated laboratory job for the rest of your life. It is an interconnected, incredibly dynamic toolkit. And it's a toolkit designed for one specific, monumental task, which is solving global crises and, quite literally, saving the planet.
Okay, let's dive into this. The explorer Robert Swan once famously said the greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it. And you know what? We really have to shatter that belief right here, right now. The responsibility isn't on some abstract someone else out there in the future. It falls directly on the scientific investigators being trained today. We just can't afford to wait for a superhero to swoop in because the threats we are facing are already at our doorstep and they are moving incredibly fast.
And that brings us to the harsh reality of our current situation. We are living in a literal code red for humanity. These are basically the ultimate villains in our race against time. Climate change is accelerating at an absolutely unprecedented rate, bringing extreme weather and ecological collapse way faster than our models even predicted. Then you have antimicrobial resistance, which is this silent pandemic making our most trusted medicines practically useless. Add to that the severe water and food security crises as our global population explodes and resources just dry up. Look, these are massive, terrifying threats, and no single person, or a single scientific discipline for that matter, can defeat them alone.
Which is exactly why we need a specialized team. To tackle a code red, you really need to understand how these four distinct scientific heroes fit together perfectly. First up, the microbiologist. They study the who, the organisms, the pathogens, those microscopic drivers of life and disease. Next, the chemist. They study the what and how much, the molecules, the pollutants, the fundamental building blocks of it all. Then we have the medical lab technology, or M.L.ट professional. They study the so what, the clinical impact, how these things actually affect human health, and the diagnostic data we get from it. And finally, the biotechnologist. They figure out the how, the actual technology to fix the problem, scaling up genetic or enzymatic solutions to make a real-world impact.
What's truly fascinating here is how the career landscape has completely transformed for these four pillars. I mean, contrast the old way with the new way. The traditional, siloed idea was that you get your degree and, well, you spend your life working in a factory lab doing quality control, or maybe you become a school teacher. But the modern scenario, it is explosive. Governments and industries are finally being held accountable under really strict ESG norms, environmental, social, and governance. Literally every major corporation now has to report their environmental impact. And this massive shift has created a crazy demand for modern roles. We're talking climate tech researchers figuring out carbon capture, ecotoxicologists assessing chemical impacts on ecosystems, and One Health consultants tracking diseases right at that critical intersection where human and environmental health collide.
So, the absolute crucial takeaway is that modern problems require synergistic solutions. This is where you see the true power of collaborative science. Take pandemic preparedness, a threat we are all way too familiar with, right? How does our team of heroes tackle it? Well, the microbiologist is on the front lines for pathogen identification. Once we know what we're dealing with, the chemist gets right to work on antiviral drug development. Simultaneously, the M.L.ट professional is developing and rolling out diagnostic testing so we can actually track the spread. And while all that's happening, the biotechnologist is designing and scaling up the vaccine production platforms. Think about it. If you remove even one of these pillars, the entire defense strategy just collapses. They absolutely have to overlap.
But to effectively operate in this collaborative space, you kind of have to rewire how you think. You have to master the scientific problem-solving mechanism, which we call the research loop. The goal of your education isn't just to memorize what a cell is, it's to transform yourself from a passive student into an active, relentless scientific investigator. It always starts with observation, looking at the real world and finding an objective. Then, it moves to problem formulation, pinpointing the gap or the threat. And finally, hypothesis, planning the experimental solution. Let me be clear, you will fail, you will redesign, and you will learn infinitely more from those failures than from your easy successes.
Let's walk through a real-world example of this loop in action. Imagine this case study, the Green Lake. Step 1, observation. You notice the lake near your campus is turning totally green during the summer and smelling worse than a chemistry lab on a Friday afternoon. Step 2, you identify the problem. Algae are blooming. They're releasing toxins that kill the fish and contaminate drinking water, and the existing water treatments, just way too expensive. So, step 3, you build your hypothesis using your new interdisciplinary toolkit. You ask, can we use a specific strain of bacteria? Hey, that's microbiology. To consume the excess nutrients, synthesize it with a specific catalyst, boom, chemistry, and scale the reaction, which is biotech? Suddenly, you aren't just reading a textbook anymore. You're out there solving a local environmental crisis.
Let's look at another high-stakes win, ocean plastic pollution. How on earth do we tackle something this massive? Again, it is a complete team effort. The microbiologist isolates the specific microbial consortia, or enzymes, that can naturally degrade the plastic. Then the biotechnologist takes those microbes and actually engineers them for enhanced super-rapid degradation. The chemist steps in to carefully analyze the chemical intermediates, just to make sure we aren't accidentally creating some new toxic byproducts. And the M.L.т professional? They are absolutely crucial here for assessing human and environmental exposure, measuring things like microplastics or related chemicals in human blood or tissue samples. It becomes this beautifully closed-loop collaborative system.
So the need of the hour is to completely leave behind the siloed approach. Studying isolated subjects with a narrow scope just isn't going to cut it anymore. We need synergistic action. We're talking about building a circular economy from the ground up. Instead of just burning agricultural waste, like sugarcane bagasse, which causes massive air pollution, by the way, we use waste-to-wealth technologies to convert that very bagasse into value-added bioplastics or biofuels. We use bioremediation to deploy microbes to clean up heavy metal contamination right out of our soil. This right here, this is where the magic happens. It happens at the intersections of your disciplines.
And because the science itself is merging, the careers are merging right along with it. These are the emerging hybrid career pathways of the future. A One Health specialist, for example, looks at the direct, undeniable link between deforestation, animal health, and human pandemics. A climate tech bioengineer is actively out there designing microbial systems to capture carbon dioxide right out of the atmosphere. Maybe you'll be a circular economy consultant, advising huge industries on how to create zero-waste loops. Or perhaps you'll dive into artificial intelligence in healthcare, using machine learning to predict molecular interactions for drug discovery. Or even become a synthetic biologist engineering entirely novel biological systems. Guys, these aren't sci-fi concepts anymore. These are active, highly sought-after roles today. Which kind of brings us to a deeply personal shift in perspective. When you step into this field, I don't just see students. I see the scientists who will discover the cure for the next pandemic. You're stepping into a profound level of responsibility. You are the ones who are going to engineer the process that captures carbon from the air. You're the ones who will develop the rapid diagnostic test that saves a premature baby's life in the ICU. You aren't just memorizing facts to pass an exam. You are actively equipping yourself to literally alter the course of human history.
So I really want to leave you with a provocative thought to ponder. A career implies something you do for yourself, right? It's a paycheck, it's a title, it's a comfortable daily routine. But in the face of these massive global code red crises we just talked about, what will be your calling? You are choosing one of the absolute hardest paths in the academic universe because you want to understand the very fabric of reality, from atoms all the way up to genes. So the real question is, how will you use that understanding?
Right now, we're facing a real crisis of confidence in science globally, and the world desperately needs people who are rigorous and fiercely collaborative. So, welcome to the frontier. The boundaries of what is possible are being redrawn every single day by these amazing cross-disciplinary teams of microbiologists, chemists, M.L.т professionals, and biotechnologists. Ask questions, stay curious, and please do not be afraid to get your hands dirty or your gloves wet. The world is waiting for you to discover the solutions we so desperately need right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. The frontier is wide open, so what world-changing solution are you going to build first?